Welcome back, spooky people. This is That Spooky Life, and I am your host, Miranda, and I am happy that you have decided to join us today for our weekly slide to the in-between. We have some spooky stories today. We have a bunch of spooky stories today. Some of them are short, but there are more than normal coming at you this week. However, to get it kicked off, I'm going to share a personal experience of my own. So there was this old house that a friend of mine used to live in, and I met him just before I started dating my now husband, but he is one of my husband's best friends. And he and his family lived in this house, and it was an older house. I am not entirely certain of the year it was built. I believe it was before the 80s, but I could not tell you how long before the 80s. And at some point, there had been an add-on done in the back that was an additional den area and 2 extra bedrooms that had a sliding glass door out to a porch that at the time we were hanging out there was just crumbling to pieces. We spent a lot of time there, especially around the time that I first started dating my husband. We watched anime, we played video games, we hung out until the wee hours. There were a couple of times that I notably remember falling asleep on the couch or one of the beds, and we just ended up spending the night. And it was a very familiar location to me. However, there was always a vibe there. Sort of nervous, sort of icky around the edges that was in the majority of the house, but didn't seem to permeate to that back add-on area where my friend actually rented a room from his parents to help them out with bills, and one of our other friends rented out the other room. So it was like, if you closed the door, it was like a little 2-bedroom apartment, basically. And you had to do kitchen stuff in the main house, and you had to use the bathroom in the main house. But just to hang out, we could close the door, and it didn't feel that way in that back area. I had noticed a couple of times a shadow. And it was not one of those tangible, that's a shadow person moments or anything like that. I'd just seen a shadow move and thought somebody walked down the hallway. Come to find out, there was nobody in the house that could have walked down the hallway, or it was one of the younger kids that was there and could not have been the height that I'd seen. One of those, I think your mom? He's like, nope, mom's at work. I'm like, no, that was a full-grown adult walking down the hallway. Didn't get any details, wasn't sure, and there was no one else in the house. Those kinds of things. I didn't like being in the main part of the house for those reasons. Unfortunately, when you arrived, the driveway is at the front part of the house. So every time we went over, we would have to come in through the main part of the house. So there was more than one occasion that I would see these things that I could not trace, see these things that I could not figure out where they were coming from, all that fun jazz. One night, I want to say we had been watching anime super late, and it was a work night. I specifically remember it was a work night because waking up in the morning without an alarm clock, luckily before either me or my husband had to be at work, there was that panic scramble. But I also remember we fell asleep, and I half woke up at some point because I heard something, and I looked, and there was a shape, a figure, standing in the doorway that connected that back, little apartment to the rest of the main house. At the time, I had a spike of fear, but decided that maybe it was just my friend's stepdad, and if I pretended to be asleep, he wouldn't bother us. Maybe we weren't supposed to be spending the night. We hadn't intended to, and easily fell back asleep in the pretending, basically. So I shared that experience later with my friend. He said that he had seen the same, but he could never prove whether or not it was somebody just peeking in or anything like that. I was never discounted on what I experienced. My friend is very skeptical and very logical minded, but when it comes to experiences and things like that, he's always been very open-minded and has had some experiences of his own that he has said he doesn't know how to explain. The conversation continued into the explanation of more than one person had crashed the night there or been there late enough that I wasn't the only one who had seen something like that. And to everyone's experience, it didn't seem like it could come past the threshold of the main house into that add-on. This, of course, would indicate something that had happened in the main house, tied it to the house itself, but prior to the add-on, so it didn't have permission or could not make itself come into that back room. We had all sort of just assumed that because the old house, the main house, felt so different, and no one had ever seen it beyond the door, that this just meant, oh, okay, well, apparently it can't come in here, probably because it's an add-on. Seems like decently logical jumps of conclusions to make. Well, this was not the only time I ever fell asleep over there on the couch. I want to say it wasn't terribly long after that, but I know that there had been enough distance that I was no longer thinking about or considering the shadow figure that I had seen. It wasn't in my mind. I was lying on the couch asleep with my now husband. The TV had been turned off, and we had been covered in a blanket, but no one else was awake in the house. And there was no light. It was late, early morning before the sun had even considered coming up. And I woke up because I had a stitch in my side and I needed to reposition. So I went from basically lying 3/4 face down to lying 3/4 face up, only for there to be someone standing over me. And I stopped, frozen in fear for that half awake, I'm probably dreaming. Am I dreaming? Coming slowly into consciousness going, no, I'm not dreaming. And there's someone in my face. And so I reached out slowly, rapidly patted the leg of my, at the time, boyfriend to try and wake him up. And as I did that, the figure stood up to its full height, stepped back, and sort of faded as it walked back towards the main house. Well, my boyfriend didn't wake up. I had a very hard time going back to sleep. That was not a work night. We were allowed to sleep until we just woke up, basically. And I slept later because I couldn't go back to sleep at that point for a while. I told my friend about what had happened and that it had really freaked me out because we'd all thought he couldn't come into that part of the house. I will never forget. My friend looked at me, looked at the door, looked at me and said, oh, hell no. So I don't remember what exactly he did, but he did something like salt across the threshold. I don't remember. There was something that was done to try and keep anything incorporeal out of that part of the house. Months later, we had not seen anything come into the part of the house. The energy felt even better in there than it had before. We had cleaned it up. We had mopped it down. There'd been some rearranging. It felt like a good space. The main house still felt icky. Whatever it was that was done to keep the incorporeal from crossing that threshold seemed to be working. Seemed to be working pretty well. And then we decided to have a movie night. The problem is, the movie night included more people than could reasonably fit in that back add-on section. My friend's parents weren't home or were letting us have the space. I don't remember which. But we got there to movie night and I discovered, much to my dismay, that movie night was happening in the main part of the house, in the main living room. That did not appeal to me, but I wanted to see the movie and I wasn't exactly going to go hang out in the back by myself and be antisocial. So, sat down, joined the party, and we're watching a movie. And of course, it was a suspenseful movie. It's a very good movie. I will never forget. It was Shadow of the Vampire with John Malkovich and Willem Dafoe. And and Udo Kier, who I love. I highly recommend if you haven't seen it, totally do so. But at one point during the movie, we had gotten up to get popcorn, people had gone to the bathroom, etc. And at one point during the movie, I thought one of our friends had gotten up to go into the kitchen and heard some things in the kitchen. And then I figured he was making popcorn again because in my peripheral, there was a figure standing in the door backlit by the yellow light of the kitchen. Didn't think anything of it until I turned and looked because, I figured he was standing there watching the movie while waiting on the popcorn, but I never heard any popcorn. And so I was like, well, why is he standing in the doorway? And I turned to ask him why he was what he was doing. And as I turned my head, no one was there. And I sat up straight and I turned around in my chair and I was looking around like I could have sworn he had just been there. And I asked, I was like, where is he? And he sat up from where he was lying on the couch and said, I'm right here. I haven't moved. And I realized that everyone was accounted for. And I said to my friend who lived in the house, I was like, are your parents around? He said, no, mom's back in the bedroom. His stepdad was at work. So the large, masculine, broad-shouldered, tall figure that I thought was our friend who fit that description was nobody in the house. I got up and I went in the kitchen. There was nobody there. Nobody's making popcorn. The light was just on. I told everybody what happened and was accused of having the movie freak me out or things like that. Or maybe it was just like one of those things that somebody had gotten up and gone to the bathroom and then my brain didn't catch up with it or something like that. But I know what I experienced. And after that, I didn't hang out in the main part of the house again. I had no interest in doing that, and any other movie nights that were held were either at someone else's house or we hung out in the back. So that is my spooky story for the week. Which brings us to our listener story for the week, which is where we have some short snippets of stories that were sent to me by awesome spooky listener Christopher. He submitted these for the HK Gather back in December that I've mentioned before, but was kind enough to let me read them on the podcast as well. And some of these are a little short, but I'm just going to see how many we can get through within a reasonable amount of time. So sit back and enjoy. Christopher writes, the first story is called The Doubleganger. This story, I had just arrived back at home. To give some perspective, I was living with 2 roommates. I drive home, and the house we were staying in had 2 sets of entrance doors. The first one went into a sort of built-in porch and then an inner door into the house. When I had left, the doors had been shut but not locked. I started unloading groceries and looked, and the doors are closed as I expected. My one roommate is at their job and the other at home. The second load, I turn around to put the groceries on the ground with the first, but this time both the outer and inner doors are wide open, and what appears to be my roommate is standing there just beyond the inner door, stock still, and huge, staring eyes not blinking or moving at all. Undeterred, I say hello, as I have my hands full, and ask them to come help me. They just stand there. I say fine, be that way, and think they're just being a jerk. I turn around and grab as much groceries as I can, which takes maybe 30 seconds. I turn back around and suddenly both of the doors are shut. I, still thinking he's being a jerk, go to open the door and it's locked. Now I'm pissed. Okay, if you don't want to help me, fine, but don't make my job even more difficult. I unlock that door and then try opening the second door, which apparently is locked now as well. I'm practically raging at this point, and open the door expecting him to be sitting on the couch or thinking he was very clever in his joke. But there's no one there. I finally locate him upstairs, asleep, and tell him off. He is utterly confused and says that was not him. I think back on it and realize that he's telling the truth. 1, he's a big guy, and there's no way that he can move that fast. 2, both doors are quite old and noisy and have distinct sounds when opening/locking them. There was no such sounds. 3, the house creaked, and the same for the steps. 4, only 30 seconds went by in the course of the encounter. I later on found out that it was a spirit trying to spook me that was known to us. Don't take on the shape of my friends. That's not cool. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Ugh. Story number 2, the coins. Still living with the same roommates, but a different house. I had a large pile of change that needed to be sorted that we left on a small table. When we left, we locked all the doors, and when we eventually came back, all the doors were still locked. I went inside, and the pile of coins had been sorted and spelled out what looked like a name, and none of us had done it. Because that's one of 2 things. That is a very tangible, very powerful spirit to be able to do something like that, or that's a fucking squatter. Either way, it's terrifying. Terrifying. Story number 3 is called The Stairs. Was with roommates again, but this is a prequel to the other 2 houses. We went to a house that was quite odd. Its interior was all white, but the house felt very cramped and had a bad energy. The stairs going up were unevenly spaced with holes in between and no railing. Ugh, that's dangerous. Probably one of my least favorite stairs to go up. I mean, fair. But up we went, and the hallway was extremely cramped with only one room at each end of essentially a long tube. As we're standing here, and the landlord is telling us about it, a presence comes behind us. I saw it in my mind as a shadowy entity with a huge Cheshire grin, wreathed in shadows and no eyes that I could see. It whispered to us happily to move in here and it would take care of us like the last tenant. I then got the impression of it shoving another person down the stairs and what it would look like if we'd stand there as well unawares. We all picked up on this thing and told the landlord politely, sorry, this is not the right space for us. We then quickly left, as you should. These are just a few of my long, odd adventures of which we call life. Let me know if you have any questions. Kind regards, Christopher. I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions. And if you would like to submit more stories, that would be wonderful and would answer some of those questions, like, what else has happened? Other questions include, where did you find two cool roommates who you were all like, oh, the boogeyman lives here and wants to kill us. We should not live here. I could come up with a list of questions, my friend, but honestly, reading more of your stories would be amazing. So thank you very much for submitting these. I have very much enjoyed them, and I hope everyone else has too. And that are our listener stories for the week. Which brings us to the witchy tip. And as per the new witchy tip schedule, we will be pulling a tarot card today. Now, many of you have heard of my wonderful tarot cards in their little baggie here. And these are the cards that I have posted on Instagram that I always use to do readings. My beloved Archeon Tarot that my friend Deandra got for me a very long time ago. And Deandra, I know that you follow on Instagram. I don't know if you listen to the podcast, but I'm still using them. They're still my favorite. They are also the ones that the Morgan had informed me were hers, and she would speak to me through. So they tend to be, well, as you guys know from listening to the podcast, very blunt, right to the chase, and don't tend to care much about your feelings. So for those of you on YouTube, or if you are from the podcast and watching on YouTube, these are the cards that we usually read from. Now, I have a few decks that I like and a couple that I'm getting to know. So we may switch it up as to which cards exactly we read from month to month, but we're doing these today. It is 2021. Let us see what is in store for us currently. In the recent past, we have the Knight of Wands. I have to get used to this camera. Ta-da! The Knight of Wands represents change, departure of a passionate nature. It's 2021 now. Bye 2020. Ooh. In the present, we have drawn the Six of Pentacles reversed, which is a card of wishful thinking and stinginess and hoarding and wasteful spending to an extent on things you don't need. I think in this particular instance, we are looking at some miserly behavior in a way that perhaps it is not the healthiest. That don't put all of your investments in one stock and don't put all of your eggs in one basket kind of thing. However, in the near future, we have the Eight of Swords reversed, which I'm going to cover up because the young lady on this card is scandalously underclad, we shall say. But as you can see, she's bound and like blindfolded and tied to a sword, and there are a lot of swords around. Usually if this card is straight up, it is very much you feel trapped, you are bound against your will, prisoner sort of thing. But reversed, it means that you are released to freedom, that the chains that have held you back will be shed and you can go forward freely into your destiny. There's been a change recently. We have some wishful thinking and perhaps some frivolous spending or stinginess happening. However, there seems that there will be a freeing energy in the near future that will allow us to move forward. Honestly, I feel like that's pretty accurate. We'll see how it goes. Says the woman who is terrible at taking her own advice. But my advice that comes with it is there's been a lot of change recently. Lots of things have started to look very different than they have most of the last 30 years, to be honest, if not longer. So I can only speak for like the last 30 years because it's my age, it's how long I've been alive. But from what I understand from my mother as well, it's been longer than that. This is very, 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 very different. We need to be frugal. We need to be smart with our time, our energy, and our money. We need to make certain that investments are worth it and that we are not being careless. However, provided that we are able to do that, we should then have the foundation to accept the freeing of our bindings and the chains shed so that we can go bravely with new perspective into the future. And that is our witchy tip for the day, our witchy tarot for the day. I hope that this week has found you in good spirits and good health. I hope that things are looking up for you. I hope that things will continue to look up for all of us. And as usual, if you have a spooky story you would like to share on the podcast, please send it to ThatSpookyLifePodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to follow me on social media at ThatSpookyLifePodcast on Instagram. And there is a Facebook page and Facebook group that you can join if you're interested. And there's a couple of other things that I post about on there. If you're interested, feel free to take a look. If you are joining us on YouTube, I am happy that you have joined us again. If you are joining us on the podcast on your normal podcasting platforms, I adore you all, and I'm glad that you are all here. Until we speak again next week, my dearest, darlingest, spookiest friends, do not forget to keep living that spooky life. Bye!